In Laravel 11, there's essentially a really easy way to add encryption to sensitive information such as your name or address and that. And we're going to look at two different approaches in this video on how we can go ahead and encrypt and decrypt those values. I'm going to first show you the old school way, which just uses a facade which will go ahead and encrypt the data. We will then have to manually decrypt this upon accessing the value, and we will have to basically encrypt and decrypt every time we retrieve or set this data. And then we're going to look at how to use the cast attribute and cast an encrypted to a string, for example, a name, and we can go ahead and do that and look at how to essentially encrypt and decrypt values using Laravel 11. Now, this is a very basic tutorial, but I think this is a really helpful feature to have if you're dealing with sensitive information in your application. And I think at the end of the day, you also have to consider the practicality of this, because if you're going ahead and trying to search certain information in the database, you want to make sure you can also find it. Now, this will be incredibly difficult if you're encrypting all of the information. So maybe make sure you have something like an identifier like the username or the email to use. You can find this information in the database for debugging purposes. But outside of that, there's not much more to say, so let's jump right into it. So in order to encrypt data in your application using Laravel 11, it is actually super simple. So I'm gonna show you first the old school way that you would maybe have to do it, and then I'm gonna show you the newer way where you can do it super easily and you have to do basically nothing in your user model. But we're gonna go ahead and take a look at two different examples here. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna migrate this application from scratch. There we go. And what I'm gonna go ahead and do now is we have our controller here where we register a user controller. I'm gonna go ahead and say encrypt. We're gonna use the Illuminati facade here. Encrypt string request name. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this would look like now using our browser and creating a user and then taking a look in the database. I've already gone ahead in here and I'm gonna show you the application. We have nothing in here. The information is not encrypted at all. This would have to be done at every single time you're storing the username, and it would have to be done for all usernames, otherwise this will break the application. So for this case, let's go ahead and look in the browser now. Alright, so in here we can register a user. I can go ahead and add a profile picture. In this case, I'm just going to choose a photo of my dog. Gonna go ahead and select name, email, and I'm gonna just put in a random password here. Click register, and that's it. So now we want to see how this looks in the database. That's it. That's the name. So the first problem you'll probably notice here now is that the name showing up here is incredibly long, and this is just not gonna work out easily. We have to do this every single time. It's good to know how to do this instead of using the more centralized way, but it is gonna be a bit of a problem in the long run because you will have to do this pretty much every single time. Then essentially we will have to do this inside the profile controller. In here we would have to make sure that upon saving this data here that the name is saved. I'm not going to go through all of this because I don't really recommend this approach unless you have a very specific and neat use case. So I'm going to go ahead and just store this now as Matilda, but before we do that I just want to show you how we decrypt it. So you're going to have a user public resource here. In here we're going to have crypt decrypt string this name. There we go. So that works fine. But we don't really want to do this. So let's go ahead, change the name here to just Matilda Ina Olsen. And that's it. And then what I want to go ahead and do now is go ahead and look at the user model. So inside this user model, we can essentially using Laravel cast certain things as, for example, array or daytime and so on. So what we can go ahead and do here is we can cast the name as encrypted. So if we go ahead in here, again, this is a website I'm working on at the moment, it's just a work in progress. We also want to make sure in here we get, just look at why this is complaining. It's because it's trying to decrypt something that's not decrypted. So we will actually, instead of updating it, just redoing it here. This is again adding this on will break application if you have previous instances of this. So before enabling this, you'd probably want to run a command or something. So I'm gonna just log out here. Make sure we go to, in this case, register. What happened now is that using this cast, we are now encrypting and decrypting all of these values here automatically in the database and automatically upon output they're being decrypted. So we do not have to do anything here. We are literally just putting this cast in. Now, if you wanted to encrypt something manually and have to deal with the getting of the attribute and all of that yourself, you can use the decrypt facade and it will be able to decrypt and encrypt things. And this essentially have one downside, and that is if you want to search by name in the database, you're not really able to do that inside the database. So you want to make sure that maybe if you need to look up records for debugging, that you can find that record. So maybe you want to have the email as not encrypted, for example, or address, or whichever way you want to do it. So you can just find the user information in the database when you have to fiddle with the database because you're needing to check some attributes and seeing why is this bug happening to this user specifically. So that's just one important aspect to consider and to apply upon using this. Otherwise, there's not much more to add. But that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching it. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.